Something broke last night. And I don't mean a radar tower or a missile defense battery. I mean something much bigger. What broke was a belief that has sat at the center of every major military and foreign policy decision America has made for 30 years. That belief died last night. The world that existed before is not coming back. What I'm about to walk you through is not hype. 30 years of strategy failed. Completely. In a single night. Against the exact coalition those 30 years of strategy were designed to prevent. The first wave was ballistic missiles aimed at command nodes. They were fired to start removing the brain of the defensive network. The second wave was cruise missiles, flying low, threading through radar gaps that Iran has known about for a long time. Iran was the fighting arm. But this wasn't just a mass barrage. It was a carefully designed strike sequence. Different weapons, different paths, different timing. The third wave was drones, timed for when defenses were least capable. You break a system by sequencing your attack until it's exhausted. Russia provided the darkness. Their role was electronic warfare, and it genuinely changes the future of conflict. Russian jamming activated exactly 18 minutes before the strike. Long enough to degrade battle management, short enough to look like background noise. Russia even provided real-time locations of U.S. military assets. Intelligence confirmed it was a comprehensive effort to track everything. But here's the kicker. Iran didn't empty its arsenal, not even close. This was a measured opening move from a country that spent decades learning patience. And then there is China. They provided the nervous system, the navigation backbone that made this operation possible. Iranian accuracy is now dramatically higher. The jammers that worked a year ago don't work anymore. The offense-defense balance has shifted. This isolated the defense batteries. They were reacting locally to fragments of a picture they could no longer see as a whole. That's precision electronic warfare. China also provided persistent satellite intelligence and real-time battle damage assessment, a level of sophistication previously only seen in the U.S. military. While this unfolded, something else happened. Two American carrier strike groups were positioned as the ultimate expression of deterrence. Within 90 minutes of the strike, both withdrew. They retreated without firing a weapon. Not because they were damaged, but because the risk was too high. How did we get here? After trillions of dollars in 30 years, the answer is institutional arrogance. Iran has transitioned to China's BeiDou system. It's unjammable, providing military-grade accuracy that American jammers simply couldn't touch. The BeiDou transition and the Russian intelligence sharing weren't secrets. The gap didn't grow in the dark. It grew while we weren't looking. Now there's a ceasefire. But the military facts on the ground don't change because the guns have temporarily stopped. The interceptor mathematics are brutal. The stockpile drains faster than the production lines can replace it. This is the new reality. People start filtering out evidence that contradicts the story they've decided is true. The gaps grew in plain sight, discussed openly in journals and news. By 2026, NATO faced an existential divergence. In the north, Poland and the Baltic states implemented the East Shield, a 1,600-kilometer network of fortifications, and a drone wall to counter Russia. But in the south, members like Italy and Spain restricted U.S. access to bases, fearing the economic fallout of a wider war. NATO has become transactional, with energy stability taking precedence over alliance cohesion. Every ally is watching. Gulf partners like Saudi Arabia and Qatar have increasingly restricted the U.S. from using their air bases for direct strikes on Iran, fearing the inevitable retaliation on their own soil. The UAE and Bahrain face a critical shortage of interceptors. Reports indicate the U.S. is stonewalling requests for replenishment because domestic production simply cannot keep pace with this level of expenditure. I understand the call. You don't risk irreplaceable $40 billion platforms. But the catastrophe is that the situation ever became one where retreat was the only choice. Jordan remains the primary hub for reinforced U.S. air power, but the political cost is rising. The king is balancing a commitment to regional defense against a public increasingly angry at the fallout of a wider war. China has refined a new type of coordination: network warfare. Thousands of civilian maritime militia vessels now serve as forward-deployed sensors for the PLA rocket force. They don't need to sink a carrier to win. By using these vessels as sensors, they force U.S. strike groups to operate at such massive distances that their sortie rates plummet. It's a blockade without firing a shot. The recovery starts from a new baseline, one where GPS dominance is broken and multi-domain coordination between rivals has a proven combat record. This alliance has an economic shield too. The BRICS Bridge and M-Bridge systems allow member states to settle trade in local currencies, bypassing the US dollar and the SWIFT network entirely. Russia and China now settle nearly all their trade in their own currencies. This system reduces friction costs and insulates the entire bloc from Western financial pressure. The global economy is splitting, but the most dangerous gap is industrial. The US is facing a systemic crisis in solid rocket motors, the engines that power every missile in the arsenal. We've hyper-consolidated to just 2 providers. The question is whether our management can honestly assess these gaps and close them while there's still time. That's the hardest thing to do. Shortages in energetics, like HTPB-45M, have halted production. A single explosion at a sub-tier supplier can freeze the entire missile pipeline. Washington is now frantically investing $1 billion to stabilize L3 Harris. U.S. shipyard capacity has reached a historic low. We cannot even meet the 2 per year production rate for Virginia-class submarines. The FY 2026 budget shows a desperate trimming of major programs. Recent war games like Tidal Wave 2 highlight the endgame. They suggest a smokeless victory for China is possible if they successfully paralyze Taiwan's communications through satellite jamming. Tell me in the comments, can we perform this self-assessment, or does the correction always come after the damage is done? I want to hear from you. In Europe, the Suwalki Gap remains the breaking point. Exercises show that Russian electronic warfare could black out the Baltics, preventing NATO reinforcements from ever coordinating a response. Across both theaters, the pattern is the same. We are slow to react to deniable, non-kinetic assaults on infrastructure. By the time we authorize a response, the adversary has already achieved its objective. But beyond the motors, there is the raw material gap. China controls nearly 90% of the processing for strategic metals needed for our high-tech guidance systems. The supply chain is a leash they can pull at any time. We don't have a domestic source for the neodymium and terbium required for our cruise missiles. While we focus on the hardware, the foundations of that hardware are owned by the exact coalition we are trying to deter. The withdrawal of the Lincoln from the South China Sea to the Mediterranean highlights the pivot failure. We no longer have the mass to handle 2 peer-level theaters simultaneously. Moving assets creates a vacuum elsewhere. Share this video, subscribe for more, and check out the next video on the Islamabad talks. This is Global Context. Stay with us. Taipei is watching these carrier movements with extreme anxiety. If the ultimate expression of American deterrence moves away from a threat in the Mediterranean, what happens when that threat appears in the Taiwan Strait? This is reinforced by the digital shield. The adoption of central bank digital currencies like the digital yuan and ruble allows this coalition to settle massive oil and gas deals instantly, invisible to swift surveillance. The primary weapon of the unipolar moment, the financial sanction, is losing its efficacy. If you can't see the transaction or block the currency, you can't stop the trade. The economic leash has been cut. The response is a return to industrial mass. The White House has proposed a massive surge to $65 billion for shipbuilding, including initial work on a new Trump-class battleship designed for attritional warfare. Allies like Japan and Australia are accelerating their own capabilities. From converting helicopter carriers into F-35 platforms to the AUKUS submarine deal, the alliance is shifting toward a decentralized, high-mass deterrent. Now we have the Islamabad Accord. Introduced on April 5, 2026, it called for a 45-day, 2-phase ceasefire following a joint U.S.-Israel air war that shook the region to its core. High-level negotiations involved U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance and Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi. A temporary 14-day ceasefire was secured on April 8th, focusing on reopening the Strait of Hormuz. But the ceasefire doesn't change the mathematics. 11 interceptors per missile, costing millions each. Our stockpile drains faster than production can replace it. This is the new attritional reality. The U.S. response focuses on a $292 billion Navy budget, aiming for a 287-ship force. Key priorities include the Columbia-class submarines and the F/A-XX 6th-generation fighter. Quality over quantity. The question is whether our leadership can set aside pride and close the gaps while there is still time. That requires the kind of honest self-assessment that confidence makes nearly impossible. Beyond hardware, the next gap is cognitive. We are entering the era of algorithmic warfare, where human decision loops are too slow to counter coordinated machine-speed strikes. AI is no longer a luxury. It is the new requirement for survival. Autonomous swarms and AI battle management systems like Lattice are designed to provide the mass we've lost. But as we saw last night, our rivals are already deploying their own integrated networks. The race for the ultimate decision loop is on. This isn't just a military shift, it's a global one. Across the global south, nations are quietly aligning their infrastructure with the BeiDou ecosystem and the BRICS financial shield. The unipolar moment is being replaced by a fragmented, multipolar world. Last night was the reckoning for 30 years of strategy. The gaps didn't grow in the dark. They grew in the light of our own institutional arrogance. Closing them requires more than money. It requires a fundamental shift in how we view the world. The Islamabad talks are just the beginning. Everything that follows depends on our ability to adapt. Thank you for watching. This is Global Context. Stay with us.